What is a counter-argument? So in this video, we're going to look briefly at what a counter-argument is and how it fits into your essay. So start by imagining yourself making an argument. You have a thesis, you have premises, and you walk through each premise giving examples and explanations that support your argument. Sounds pretty airtight, right? Well, it is until you start to think and imagine somebody else coming along and having an objection to your argument. What would you do in that case? Well, you would come up with a response to that objection. And so a counter-argument is essentially a response to an objection that somebody would have against your argument. Now, we have to do this by anticipating or thinking ahead as we're writing to what somebody might say in opposition to what we are writing about. Once we've thought that through, if we can anticipate that argument, then we can prepare a counter-argument against it. So, for example, if I have an essay in which I'm talking about the idea of a multicultural society and that societies should adopt multiculturalism, and I've done 2 or 3 body paragraphs explaining that, then I might want to anticipate what people would say in objection to my argument. And so I write, those who are against the idea of having a multicultural society often claim that, and then in that blank, I would put the objection that I imagine the person making to me. And I would go on and say, however, the reality is that, and I would put in here my response. So how about we look at a real-life example of that? Those who are against the idea of having a multicultural society often claim that it can cause the national culture of the country to be diluted and lost. However, the reality is that introducing new cultures inside a host culture often causes the host culture to experience a renaissance. So what I've done there is I've anticipated that the objection to my argument might be that the national culture of the country would be diluted and lost. And then I've put in a response to that objection that answers it before it was even asked. This is a very powerful method of strengthening your argument in an essay or in any type of communication that you do. Now let's add one more component to a good counter-argument, and that component is concession. So imagine yourself making your argument, and imagine the objection being raised. Instead of immediately refuting the objection, I might want to agree with a little part of it. I might say, well, it's true that, and then give a certain part of his objection. However, and then I come back with my own response. How is that different than the simple counter-argument we said before? Well, we're adding a little bit of agreement with the other side before we put it down. And that has the effect of making us seem reasonable and thoughtful. And in fact, you are reasonable and thoughtful if you think through what another person's argument has that you can actually agree with, even if you don't agree with the whole thing. So let's put that into action here and look at a counter-argument with a concession. Those who are against the idea of having a multicultural society often claim that it can cause the national culture of the country to be diluted and lost. That's the same beginning that we had when we did the simple counter-argument without the concession. Look what I add in here. It is true that introducing new cultures can make some people feel insecure at first. However, the reality is that introducing new cultures inside a host culture often causes the host culture to experience a renaissance. Do you see what we've done there? We've taken the part of the objection that we can agree with, even if it's a small part. We can agree with the fact that it may make some people feel insecure. And so we acknowledge that, and then we go on to do our full counter argument. Now let's take a look at how a counterargument is structured inside your essay. So to review here, I've laid out the classical argument essay that we typically use. We start with an introduction. We go to body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, body paragraph 3, and a conclusion. And so if we look at that in more detail, we have the introduction, which has my thesis statement, has background definitions, my thesis statement with my 3 key premises. Then I've got body paragraph 1, which starts with a topic sentence, has 3 sets of statement, example, explanations, and a concluding sentence, and then the same structure for body paragraph 2 and body paragraph 3, and my conclusion. That is the outline of my typical argumentative essay. Now, when we add counterargument, we're going to add another paragraph after the final body paragraph and before the conclusion. That's the typical place where we put the counterargument, and it makes sense. It's after we've made our argument and before we wrap it up. We just give a chance to respond to potential objections to our argument. In the counterargument paragraph, we're going to give a topic sentence, a first and a second counterargument, and a concluding sentence. And then for counterargument 1, here's the structure for that. I'm going to state my objection. I'm going to give an example of that objection, and then I'm going to explain how that's not logical or correct, and I'll give my own example back. Now be sure when you state the objection of the other side that you're showing that it's an objection of the other side. Don't make it sound like it's your own argument, or else you'll be working against yourself. And then if we wanted to make a counter-argument with a concession, to make the concession, we ask ourselves, what can we agree with from the other side's objection? And remember, this shows that you're reasonable and thoughtful, and it adds to your credibility. Remember ethos? This is a way to build your own ethos. Now, don't give away too much. Don't agree with the other side too much, just a little bit. So you'd want to state your objection, give an example of the objection, and then give the concession. State what aspect of it may be true, and then explain how it's a fallacy, not logical or correct. We'll take a look at a full example of a counter-argument paragraph in class. And that is a quick introduction to counter-argument.